Chair Cassett, we're live.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. At 5:08 p.m., I'm going to call the Wednesday, July 3rd Quality of Life Committee meeting to order. May I please have a roll call?
Counselor Chavez,
Here.
Counselor Castro,
Presente.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Present.
Chair Cassett,
Here.
or Manager.
And for the record, Counselor Faulkner is excused today. No problem. We need it on the official record, so thank you. Moving on to approval of the agenda. Any changes from members of the committee or staff? And if not, can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second. Motion and a second. We are hybrid, so I do need a roll call, please.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
Aye.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Cassett,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to approval of consent. I understand that nothing has been pulled off in advance. Is there anything that anyone would like to pull off at this time? And if not, can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second and a roll call, please.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
Aye.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Cassett,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. All right, moving on to our main event for the day. It is a presentation, the Santa Fe Homelessness Response Progress Update. We have a number of wonderful people here to present. We have Roseanne Haggerty, President of the Community Solutions, and Mandy Teteloff, Chief of Staff. Is that? Nope, we do not. We have Brittany Rodriguez, who is the Built for Zero System Improvement Lead with New Mexico Coalition to End Homelessness, VNA Compost, Business, Built for Zero Community Data Manager, and there was somebody else on here that I did not read their names. Nope, I got everybody, right? I think so. All right, I will hand it over to you all and take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the invitation to be here, Chair Cassett. I'm Roseanne Haggerty. I'm the President of Community Solutions, and we are thrilled to be working with the City of Santa Fe toward making homelessness rare and brief. I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview of Built for Zero and really turn most of the presentation over to Brittany and VNA, who've done such marvelous work at the coalition, which is the continuum of care lead for the homelessness work here in Santa Fe. Built for Zero and Community Solutions is a not-for-profit. We work in 143 COCs across the country, every type of community, large and small, rural and urban, and also 4 states, 7 healthcare systems, and 5 other countries. What we have codified is essentially an approach that takes on homelessness in much the way that a community would respond to a natural disaster. Everyone focused on the same aim, knowing those affected by name in real time, really iterating the responses to get to a shared outcome. And so our work with all of these communities and with Santa Fe in particular has been about helping that coalition of not-for-profit and government agencies and funders and other key stakeholders come together around a single aim, measuring progress in the same way. And another critical foundation element, which you'll hear about today from the team, is identifying and having the capacity to continually update who actually is experiencing homelessness in real time and having that clear inflow and outflow data. This is a dynamic problem. It's going to look different next week than it looked last week. And what we find just as in a natural disaster and that kind of iterative response environment that's needed, it's that information that's really the glue to help hold together all of the community's efforts so that there isn't redundant effort, that people get quickly matched to the help they need, that a community can see its assets and really optimize them. It doesn't solve the problem of communities needing to continue to invest in housing, which is a national crisis, but it has proven to enable communities to make very profound, meaningful, and measurable progress in reducing homelessness, even without the sufficient resources that any community in the country now needs with respect to housing. We have 18 communities that have gotten to what we call functional zero homelessness for one or more populations, typically veterans and those who are experiencing chronic homelessness. And then we also are seeing some of the communities that have been in that cohort of getting those first populations resolved, now closing in on zero homelessness for all, which doesn't mean that there's never going to be people having housing crises or falling into homelessness. But what we're seeing is that like many other crises and emergency situations, communities can get to the point where homelessness is rare because it's prevented, because people are working together upstream, that new cases are quickly identified, and that they're quickly resolved, ideally within 30 days. And so that's what the future is that we're working toward with all of these communities. And we are enormously delighted and proud of the work that's happening here in Santa Fe that you'll hear about from Brittany and Biani.
Thank you so much, Roseanne, for introducing Built for Zero and our team. I'm going to go through our slides and just touch a little bit more on Built for Zero as a whole, how the coalition is involved. Monet Silva should be joining us to try to talk a little bit about the coalition, the work the coalition does, and again, how Built for Zero is fitting into that work. And then we'll go into an overview of city progress, city partnerships, and then what everybody's been waiting for, a data introduction in the progress that we've been able to make in terms of community data collection. Oh yeah. So what is Built for Zero? As Roseanne just mentioned and pointed on, it's a movement to measurably end homelessness for entire populations using data. And our goal is to make homelessness rare overall and brief when it does occur. So again, pointing out we're not ending homelessness. We recognize that it'll happen, but how are we going to address it swiftly and quickly when we do identify those individuals? Built for Zero is a new problem-solving toolkit for our community. We're looking at data analytics, human-centered design, quality improvement, and facilitation. Right now, one of the areas that we've had a lot of progress is in facilitation and bringing key partners and stakeholders to the table to start this work with us. Built for Zero isn't just a coalition project, it's a community project. So we want to make sure that we're involving everybody who actively works within this system in addressing homelessness. And talking about where we might intervene for greatest impact, right now, really working in the technical space, trying to understand a little bit more what our community is up to, identifying strengths, finding challenges, being able to utilize best practices to get our system aligned so that we are able to navigate our clients experiencing homelessness through that system. So in that system implementation space, making sure that the user, both the person experiencing homelessness and the person navigating homelessness, are informed and able to do so in a streamlined way. And then looking down way at the bottom, policy, benefits, funding partners, those types of things that really solidify and maintain the work that we're doing here in our communities. Built for Zero is building data capacity to end homelessness. So using data science skill sets, changing community data culture. I think we've all recognized, and this isn't unique to Santa Fe, that a lot of agencies and service providers and even local government tend to work in silos. So how do we bring that all together to make sure that we're all on the same page with data numbers and that we're able to use it in a way that's meaningful to each of our own entities? And offering different tools, technology, and staffing capacity is a huge one, but being able to identify, again, strengths in staffing, where we could use some support. And again, not another crisis that's unique to Santa Fe, but there's just simply not enough providers and support staff to go around at the moment. So thinking creatively on, how we can redefine roles and responsibilities so that our system is streamlined and that staff themselves feel supported in the same way that, not in the same way, but in the way that clients are being supported as well. So the New Mexico Coalition to End Homelessness oversees oversees the COC, and we have two coordinated entry or COC projects. That's Albuquerque and the balance of state. So I pulled this off of our website. And the other thing that we oversee is HMIS and the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project, which has actually moved out of its demonstration phase, and it is now a full project. And that is in the southern part of the state, and it is solidified in the northern part of our state.
Brittany, real fast, because in case members of the public are listening, we use a lot of acronyms. We use a lot of phrases that don't mean anything to other people. So COC, balance of state, HMIS, I think is just a data system, so that's not.
Yeah,
very exciting.
and then coordinated entry is up there as well. And for you all, you should have an updated presentation, but for members of the public, I'll run through those really quick. HMIS is the Homeless Management Information System. It's largely used as a reporting tool for agencies who receive money from the COC or the Continuum of Care. The Continuum of Care is both a funding source in a regional area. Coordinated entry system is the prioritization and assessment system used to place people into permanent supportive housing. And
Balance of state is another one that's frequently used that doesn't mean anything to people who do not use this or areas in this world.
and it doesn't, it's a hard one for me to comprehend as well. So the way that we are kind of divided is Albuquerque has its own kind of funding area, regional priorities, and then the rest of the state falls into what is called the balance of state. So as you can imagine, that's regionally, geographically, that's a lot of area to cover. We are a pretty smaller state in terms of population, but it's a lot of work for those teams to make sure that all counties are aligned with the work being done and that they're informed of the work being done at the coalition and, you know, open and able to access grant funding opportunities. So I don't envy that, like their job is so hard and they're doing such a great job. And so that is what balance of state means for us. Anything else I can provide some clarity on?
I think that was it, unless you guys have another definition you heard, but sorry to interrupt the flow. Just want to make sure. Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move into Santa Fe updates, and then the man of the hour. If Monet comes online, I'd like to give her the opportunity to speak a little bit more on the coalition. She's currently in Washington, D.C., attending a conference and was going to try to make an effort to be on tonight. But in terms of Santa Fe updates, we're going to go over our 2-year aims and strategic framework, stakeholders, our City of Santa Fe partnerships, our data update, and then looking ahead. This is very small and I apologize. It's a lot of text for one slide, and I am going to do a little bit of reading. So in August of last year, we had a large community meeting where providers, people from all sectors came to give their input on what 2-year aims and strategies would look like for Santa Fe. We had a follow-up meeting after that in November, after our Built for Zero team went to Washington, D.C. to do some work with some of our peer communities. Brought that back, and in November had another community meeting to realign and really dig down into some of our aims and goals and come up with action items and plans to implement the work. So our 2-year aims are a equality by name list, functional zero for veterans by Veterans Day of this year, and then functional zero for youth by August 12th, 2025, so next year. Equality by name list, as again, Roseanne mentioned, is truly a list of every individual experiencing homelessness in our community. And BNA is going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like and how we're trying to manage that. But one of the things to build our by name list is increasing access to the coordinated entry system, or that point where people are able to kind of show up, say I exist, and in that moment they can either choose to take a housing assessment or not. They choose not to, not a problem at all. They still make it onto our by name list. So in order to access as many people as possible, so we wanted to increase access to coordinated entry. We did that through a Santa Fe area specific training. We wanted to coordinate our community outreach, which has been an amazing experience. So we created an outreach improvement team, and those individuals helped us complete our scorecard and create coordinated outreach throughout the city. That's a team that meets monthly. We were meeting more frequently, but we're kind of in a maintenance area where we're able to all come together, discuss data quality and maybe new or different ways of providing outreach so that we're able to get individuals on our by name list. We wanted to expand service coordination. So in terms of outreach, making sure that every outreach provider was somewhat knowledgeable of what another outreach provider does, so that there's not duplication of services, so that there's not duplication of effort. which I think are two different things in that people know where to direct others when they're trying to meet the direct immediate needs of a person they're encountering in the community. One of the other things we're doing to accomplish this is providing technical assistance for these data collection systems to agencies. So going on site, answering the questions, showing people, you know, what needs to be happening, navigating them through those systems, and providing support along the way, which our other teams in the coalition do, but we have the luxury of only working in Santa Fe. So we don't have to worry about the balance of state. We have the time and the energy to be able to give directly to our providers the technical assistance they may need. Moving into Functional Zero for Veterans by Veterans Day. This is where we're doing a lot of work right now. We want to increase access to safe and stable shelter. We want to diversify safe and stable housing, streamline access to wraparound services, and expand education around efforts. And again, these are all goals set by our community, not by us. And I want to make that really clear. While we facilitate these conversations and guide people, these are all ideas that are coming from the people actually providing the services on the ground. So in order to meet our aims and goals, some of the things we're starting to look at more is advocating for more construction and rehab of housing, centralizing property engagement efforts. So doing outreach to landlord associations, apartment complexes, trying to understand if they have veteran preference. And if they don't, can we talk about it? Types of conversations. We'd like to explore a veteran-specific safe outdoor space. One of the pieces of feedback that we got from our veteran provider community is that veterans generally don't use emergency shelter in the same way others experiencing homelessness might. They're pretty good at living off grid, surviving, and not really needing to access services in a traditional way. So how can we make services attractive to veterans? And perhaps the safe outdoor space is something that would be interesting to them in order to kind of gauge, you know, what those individuals want to see in services for themselves. We also want to conduct strategic outreach to veterans with lived expertise. So finding those individuals who are either previously unhoused or currently unhoused and asking them, you know, what would you like to see so that we can try to make sure that, you know, you're getting what you need, what you want so that you feel stable and secure. Another piece of feedback around our veterans is they've been burned by our system over and over again, and it's hard to trust the system again. So being able to receive that feedback and being able to really engage those individuals in conversation, I think will go a long way and have a lot of weight. We also want to increase utilizations of benefits and services. Theoretically speaking, veterans who have a positive discharge have access to every benefit that they need in order to have stable lives. I think that's part of the reason why a lot of communities start with veterans is being able to streamline that system because there are resources out there for them. And then kind of went out of order here, but promote advocacy with policymakers. As we get into city partnerships, we are working with the Veterans Advisory Board to align our efforts and understand a little bit more what they would like to see in the community, and not just surrounding homelessness, but services in general, and being able to provide some support to that team. Moving on to Functional Zero for Youth. You're going to see kind of a lot of the same things: increase access to safe and affordable housing, streamline access to wraparound services, and expand education around efforts. When we're talking about increasing access to safe and affordable housing, one of the things we've heard is that we need bridge housing. So that's a type of housing that, you know, a youth has, you know, exited homelessness. There's a housing opportunity in the very near future, but there's nowhere for them to be in the interim. And so mostly youth shelters and family services, that is something where they're really needing support in terms of their rapid rehousing clients. The voucher's available, the unit's available in a couple of months. What are we going to do with this kiddo in the meantime? We also want to increase coordination with apartment associations for this population, work on streamlining accesses to services, increase staff capacity, and promote fair wages. align values, priorities with all entities that support youth, and then again, incorporate youth with lived expertise and advocacy around any of these policies. So the coalition is reinitiating our YAB, or a Youth Advisory Board for the northern part of New Mexico. So we're really excited to see what a partnership with them might look like so that we can get their input. Moving into Santa Fe stakeholders. So again, these are some of the goals and aims of Built for Zero. Establish just system level aims and priorities. You know, who's helping us do that? Our key programs, those are our emergency shelters, our service providers, the people doing the work and seeing what's happening on the ground every day. Agency leadership, so program managers and executive directors. And then the coalition are partnering to develop our 2-year aims with our milestones and our strategic framework. We revisit every 6 months, if not more frequently, to make sure that the work that we're doing makes sense and that it's going in the right direction. Stakeholders also champion improvement and changes. The S3 Housing Initiative is a huge champion of Built for Zero Santa Fe. They have taken a deep interest in this model as a new tool to be able to understand a little bit more where funding can help in terms of housing. Again, agency leadership, so those executive directors empowering their staff to be able to participate in Built for Zero, and then community members as well. We want to make sure that and acknowledge that homelessness impacts everybody in a community. And when we're looking at these types of interventions and these really, huge problems, community members are vital in being able to voice their concerns, put forth solutions, and be part of the conversation. We're also monitoring progress, so a nice level of accountability. Who's doing that? The coalition, our key programs, agency leadership, and policymakers. We want to be accountable to you all as much as we hope that you are accountable to the work being done and promoting it. So really implementing those system changes and supporting and maintaining those changes when they do. And then lastly, our stakeholders help us problem solve and clear the path. And that's kind of everybody: the housing initiative, key programs, agency leadership, the coalition, community makers, and policymakers. That's the area where, we really want everybody to be engaged and working together and moving forward as a cohesive unit. There's always, going to be some disagreement. There's always going to be somebody who's only 80% satisfied. And some people who aren't, and that's okay. We want everybody at the table to be able to come up with solutions and guide the work. Moving into current City of Santa Fe partnerships. Right now we're working in 4 areas with the city. So we have the City Park Rangers, and they do incredible outreach. They're actually one of our highest data contributors to who's experiencing homelessness every day in our community. And we've kind of, I don't want to say turn them into baby social workers, but that's kind of what it is in terms of service coordination, making sure that they're knowledgeable of what's available to people in the community when they're encountering them. If they have to issue a notice, being able to offer options instead of just saying, you gotta go. The other partnership is the Veterans Advisory Board. So I understand that they presented a strategic plan recently. So we want to make sure that we're aligned with them and veteran homelessness initiatives. And our 2 newer projects that have been in discussion, I would say in the past 4 weeks, is increasing access point for housing assessments using our public libraries. And then also finding ways to support our librarians who are engaging with unsheltered individuals. I think that a lot of times we forget that is a service that's heavily utilized, and being able to, catch those people where they're at, being able to start conversations, and being able to support our librarians is something that we're really excited to work with Maria on and her team to see what progress we can make there. And then our last connection is the 211 Connect system. And this is specific to veteran agencies at this point, but is to broaden agency participation. So going to Goodwill, going to HUD-VASH, going to some of those other service providers, and recruiting them to the Unitas platform so that we can better track veteran service utilization and outcomes. that brings us to data. Do you want to do questions on that half now, or would you like to save questions for the end?
Let's go ahead and save questions because I know the data is also going to illuminate a lot of this work. So let's go ahead and move forward.
Thank you. I'm going to pass this over to Vianney Campos.
Hey everyone, my name is Vianney Campos. I am the Community Data Manager for Built for Zero, and I am going to present to you our data updates. So to give you kind of a bird's view of what data we are looking at when we are looking at our focuses for Built for Zero. So the first pillar that we looked at was HMIS, which is the Homeless Management Information System, which, as Brittany said, is the data software that our providers are required to use by HUD in order to receive funding. And so here you can see that based off of an APR report, which is an annual performance report, that needs to be done on an annual basis for HUD, I was able to see that we served, or our providers, our providers served a total of 856 people and 385 people were exited from HMIS, which gives us a total of 471 actively homeless in Santa Fe. This number only represents clients who accessed formal services from our providers. The second pillar that we looked at was our coordinated entry system data. And just to reiterate, the CES team is CES sector at the coalition. It is a prioritization system used by our COC to assess homeless individuals for housing placement and services. The CES also feeds our by name database, which I will get into in a little while. The CES system helps us get an overall picture of people who have been given a VI SPIDAT assessment and who have signed an ROI to be entered into CES. And so single adults, we have 163 people, just adults, and 23 youth, 27 families, and 10 veterans. That is a total of 279 people on our by name database. And so here you can see the first discrepancy, which is a data gap that we have been trying to fill, which is the data that we have entered into our HMIS system, and then the data that we have entered into CS. So we have been making some pretty big efforts with our providers to enter the data that is in HMIS into CS. And so the third pillar, which was primarily developed by our outreach providers, it is an anonymous coding system that was developed to capture unhoused individuals accessing any services, engaging in interaction with direct staff. And this also includes informal types of services, which can really be if they went into an agency to get a lunch or something of that nature. It could be considered more informal. And so this coding system was also developed in order to be more inclusive of agencies not using HMIS. And it is also sensitive to HIPAA and confidentiality requirements that each agency needs to follow. This coding system also functions as a first step in building rapport and destigmatizing data sharing. Because sometimes clients can be a bit hesitant on giving their personal information. So code doesn't sound as scary, but it is still very substantial information that we can later use. And so for the codes unduplicated, we had a total of 450 unique codes. And so we have been asked which of these numbers is the most accurate representation of the of the people who are actively homeless in our community. We think that the most accurate number is the 450 codes, just because this coding system acts almost as our point in time count for our community on a monthly basis. And so our traditional point in time count is an annual count that our COC implements into our community. And so for us to be able to do this on a monthly basis and get a pretty good idea of who is actively using services, that can give us a much more, a much more updated or current count of who is currently unhoused. Whereas the 471, that is not as current, it is not as real-time data. However, it is very substantial to use. I don't ever want to invalidate any of the other pillars of data that we do look at. And so to give just some quick updates on what we have been doing in our community, on May 1st, we had a total of 244 people in our coordinated entry system. And as of June 16th, there are 279 people in coordinated entry. And so as you can see, we have been working with our providers to help us fill that gap between people that they enter into HMIS and that they enter into coordinated entry, because that tells us the number of people who are accessing housing services. And so this has been a pretty big milestone for us to get the data from 244 people to 279 people. For our veteran population data, we have been working with our veteran improvement team, and they have been supporting us very heavily in cleaning up the data and really helping us have a much more clear picture of how many veterans are experiencing homelessness in Santa Fe. And so of May 1st, we saw a total of 21 unhoused veterans in our coordinated entry system. After cleaning up our data, we have a total of 10 unhoused veterans in our CES system, 5 of which are inactive and 10 are currently housed. So what inactive could mean, it could mean that maybe they lost contact with them, so they haven't been in contact with any agency for the past 90 days, or they just moved out of state. Something that is just not housed. They don't know if they were housed or not. And we were very pleased to know that 10 of those were actually currently housed. And so right now we are working on establishing what are called data access points. As Brittany mentioned it in our library access point project, I am working with one of the case managers who is a member of our veteran improvement team in order to establish a data access point in healthcare for the homeless. And so this is a really important access point for veterans, just because primarily medical care services is where they go and access services. So this would be a really good point for them to have that developed rapport already in the services that they access. So here I have some screenshots of our Built for Zero dashboard, but I'm going to try and open up the website so I can show you a bit more interactively what this looks like. Is everyone able to see this, or should I make it a bit bigger?
I think we're good.
So here you can sort of see the trajectory of Built for Zero. So over here, you can see that Built for Zero began before the pandemic. So it started in 2019. There is not much security that the data presented here is reliable or accurate, just because there has been a lot of experimentation on what reports to pull when wanting to document appropriately what requirements there are for Built for Zero. And so here you can see a lot of fluctuation of the numbers that were presented before the pandemic, right after the pandemic. And then when in 2022, the numbers were being updated by our HMIS team at the coalition, but no one was actively working as part of the Built for Zero program. And so really only numbers were being updated just to keep the Built for Zero momentum going. And so here in 2023 was when the Built for Zero program was started up again officially through the New Mexico Coalition to End Homelessness. And so these numbers are a lot more representative of what the unhoused population is in Santa Fe. And so here you can see up until January of this year, there was still some fluctuation in the types of reports that we were pulling in order to get these numbers. And so it wasn't until January of 2024 when we really fine-tuned that we needed to use coordinated entry as the way to fuel our by name database, because this was a streamlined way that we could really see and pick up on who was accessing housing services, or we could get them in that trajectory of accessing homelessness services and then get them into housing services. And so here you can see for May of 2024, I'm going to show you the data for all populations. Here you can see how the data has increased in our coordinated entry system. And so here we finally have 279 in May. And it counts it as May on the website, but it actually counts it as the last 2 weeks of May and the first 2 weeks of June. But just for the sake of documenting it on the dashboard, it shows up as May data. And so here you can interact with the dashboard and it can show you the youth population. The youth population has stayed pretty much the same. They have a very established internal way of documenting, collecting, and analyzing their data. They have been pretty consistent with their data collection. There hasn't really been too much work that I've had to do with youth providers in order to really clean up and better their data collection. That's already there. So we're just going to be using their established systems in order to be able to work with them and to improve the rates at which we house youth. And here I will just quickly show you the veteran population. And so here you can also see a pretty large fluctuation of data. And so here you can see that it jumped from 21 all the way to 10. And so here on the left, you can see that the functional zero threshold is 3. And so what functional zero means, it can sort of shift when it comes to different populations. And so in general, for all single adults, functional zero means that we are housing people at a higher rate than the people who are incoming into our homelessness systems. And so this can fluctuate a bit for our chronic population. And so it can get a little bit more specific for the chronic population. So functional zero means that we either have 0 people who are experiencing chronic homelessness, or if not 0, 3 people or less, or 1% of our entire chronic population are experiencing homelessness. And then for veterans, that can mean that we are housing veterans at a much higher rate than the veterans that are becoming unhoused. And so, for example, if we were to house 4 veterans on a monthly basis, that would mean that we would have to have a population of 4 veterans that are unhoused. And so here on the dashboard, on the graph, you can see that the functional zero threshold sort of embarks much more of the graph, as well as on the youth graph. It embarks much more of, it embarks much more space on the graph, just because we are reaching a much lower threshold towards functional zero. And feel free to ask me as many questions as you'd like. On functional zero, it can be a little bit confusing and it can be a little bit difficult to translate. So our next steps for data, it is to continue filling our gaps. So what this means, it is to get our data pillars to match. We would like to continue our efforts in increasing data quality in terms of timeliness, accuracy, and completeness. As Brittany said, we are doing routine agency check-ins with our providers in order to do some troubleshooting with data, see where they need further support, clarity, or even training in their data collection in order to fill these gaps. And so next, we will be having a much closer look into our outflow. So we will be having a much more closer look into housing placements. We're going to be looking at how are vouchers being used in our community, what is the length of time spent looking for housing, what is the length of time between being given a voucher and actually being housed, what is the average number of housing placements in the last 90 days, and we will be looking at the rates at which people are returning from inactive states or housed back to active homelessness. And so Built for Zero also has a tool that is called a community scorecard. And so what the scorecard is, it is a tool that helps us sort of get a snapshot of our community's process and progress towards developing a quality by name database. And so what a quality by name database is, it is a comprehensive and by name database that follows the trajectory of someone on a client-based rate, which means that we take a look at when they enter homelessness, their patterns of entering, exiting, and re-entering homelessness. Also, what their experiences with chronicity. It is just a very detailed and a very deep dive into their experience with homelessness. And so on our scorecard, we have currently a 26 out of 29. Here are the 3 different questions that we still have answered a no to. And so the first one is based off of our community participation and coverage. So the question is your by name list able to collect data on all currently homeless single adults in your community, including individuals fleeing domestic violence? And so the field of domestic violence is a very tricky field to actually incentivize data sharing, just because we want to be very intentional, very strategic with the way that we have domestic violence data shared in our community. That is still a no, but that is something in progress. It is a project that we are currently embarking on. We're trying to see what data is currently being collected, if that is data outside of their primary data software called Osnium. We would like to see in what ways we can use even aggregate data that would still be useful for us to get a better insight on who is actively homeless and who is also experiencing domestic violence. And the next two questions are based on data infrastructure. So does your community's by name list track individuals returning to active homelessness within the past month? And that is currently a no, because we are still trying to gather very concise information on, well, first of all, how people are exiting our system. We need a lot better quality data on that. We need providers to provide much more detailed information on where clients are going. And in our database, we will be able to keep people who are moved onto the inactive stage. We will be able to keep them in our database, and then we can track if they do come back into homelessness in a much more easy way, because all of this information is going to be in one place in the by name database. The next question is, can your by name list track historical changes in activity status? For example, active to inactive, inactive to housed, etc. And so pretty much mirroring the previous question, we are getting a much more solid and concise understanding of housing placements. Currently, it is not required for providers to specify dates of when people are being housed or how they're being housed. And so that is something that we're trying to figure out, if it is information that is stored on the back end for agencies, and then later we can strategically bring it forward and actually use that information.
Thank you for that. And like BNA said, please ask all of the questions because data is complicated. Functional zero is complicated. And we've just been doing so much work around that. And again, trying to shift the conversation around what data sharing looks like and what it can actually contribute to our community and our goals. So looking ahead, you can expect from us over the next 3 months, and things we've already been doing is one-on-one data coaching, facilitation of improvement teams, an evaluation of our current progress to identify further areas for improvement. And right now, the improvement teams we have active are the outreach improvement team, the veterans improvement team, and then we're starting a case conferencing improvement team and a leadership improvement team. And so hopefully our goal is to have a really diverse representation on those teams, not the same people from the same agencies on all 4 teams, making sure that, we're getting participation from every level of provider in the community. And I wanted to include this as our last slide because I think it was really impactful, and it it meant a lot to me when we asked this question. So at our last community meeting, which we had on May 1st, we posed this question during the lunch hour. What are 3 things that would make your job easier, community providers, that don't include more funding, more housing, or more staff? And this is what everybody was able to give back to us. And looking at some of the things highlighted in red, I know it's kind of hard to see on that screen. These are things that we're already doing and working on. The one that I really want to draw attention to is public empathy. That to providers would make a world of difference if they had the support of the community behind them. A lot of times they feel, overlooked, underheard, and they're the ones doing that work every single day. And just saying it out loud, they're not paid enough to do the work that they do. They do some of the most, challenging and create some of the most meaningful relationships with individuals that just hold a lot of stigma, and that goes unnoticed quite frequently. So looking at some of the other things that that we're tackling right now is reducing redundancy in effort and duplication of services. We're trying to come up with new ways to regularly disseminate information to providers and hopefully our community here soon. They noted that Unitas would be incredible for more agencies to join, because that's just another platform where you can kind of track the journey of somebody utilizing services. More integration with other agencies. We're tackling that with community case conferencing, which another word or idea could be triaging or staffing are some common phrases that people use in terms of talking about individual clients and how to move them along. Warm handoff. So when agencies are ready to hand somebody off to a different case manager, making sure that we're facilitating that in a meaningful way so that that person continues to feel supported. Better data integration, community collaboration, quality VI SPIDATs, which is that housing assessment that gets people onto our by name list. And another thing is creating a North Star message that we can all rally around. I think, for providers, the community, to be able to look to one area and say, this is what we're doing and we're doing it together feels good. And it keeps the progress and momentum moving forward. So trying to develop that with all of our partners, what is the clear North Star for Santa Fe? What do we want to see? What do we want to accomplish? And what can we all rally behind? And we're hoping and using Built for Zero as, the platform to start those conversations and really identify what does that mean for Santa Fe? So with that, we will wrap up our presentation. Again, all the questions, we didn't really dive into everything that we're doing. So this is truly a surface level of what's been happening with us and our team. So I will pass it back to you, Madam Chair and counselors.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Really do appreciate it. And I do appreciate this very robust presentation. But also, as you said, this barely scratches the surface. And I really do want to thank you all for your work, coming from this field and understanding that there is, the framework that we put on paper, but then we're working with people. And so it gets unpredictable, to say the least, and the way that you guys are looking at some of these challenges and solving those problems. Really appreciate you coming here to share those with us and what progress has been made, and also where you are recognizing some areas that we still need to move in, and of course how we are able to support you is one of our biggest concerns and questions. One quick housekeeping, we have a different PowerPoint on PrimeGov than what was here. So if you guys could please send the updated one to Marcella, we'll make sure to get that up both for members of the committee or governing body as well as members of the public. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to any members of the committee of questions. And Ben, if you could take down the PowerPoint so I can see if Councilor Chavez has any questions, that would be phenomenal. Councilor Castro, go ahead.
Perfecto, muchas gracias. Gracias a Presidente Haggerty por estar aquí también. Tengo algunas preguntas acerca de cómo decidieron en quién se iban a enfocar. En los números que vimos, tanto veteranos como la juventud tienen números muy bajos. ¿Cómo llegamos a estas dos poblaciones?
Do I answer in English?
You could.
Okay. So the way that we took the focus on youth and veterans was because as a requirement of Build for Zero, communities do need to take a focus on a community that they feel they will be able to work with the systems already in place in order to be able to house people at this is kind of a very complex way that we did get to youth and veterans. So I will let Brittany take the lead on this.
And just so I understand your question, how did we land on choosing youth and veterans as our target populations when they're such a smaller population within our community? And as VNA was stating, Built for Zero works population by population. It's part of the model, and being able to choose smaller populations to kind of test what system alignment might look like so that we can scale it up to larger populations is one of the key aspects of Built for Zero. And again, we listen to our community and our community partners on where they would like to focus their work, and they chose veterans and youth. Another area of interest that is rising, not only in Santa Fe, but across the nation, are seniors and families. And so we're really excited with the progress we've made with veterans to translate that to youth and then really have a strong system to be able to address those even more challenging, right, populations that are starting to surface, like I said, again, nationally and within our own community. So the fact that they're a bit of a smaller population is actually really beneficial to us because we can really hone in and really zoom in and see what works and what doesn't. And of course, it's going to look a little bit different across populations, but it's that test, that little pilot group that we're able to really focus on and then scale up.
Perfecto, muchas gracias. Y la siguiente pregunta que tengo tiene que ver con los números que estamos viendo. Aunque sí estamos haciendo buen trabajo, sí estamos viendo que esos números están creciendo. ¿Tenemos alguna razón o algún plan para tratar de limitar eso mientras creamos más casas?
The question was if we are taking a look at what we can do about the inflow in the meantime that we do take care of developing more housing, correct? So yes, we are taking a look at what we can do in terms of prevention. And so we are looking at the ways that our data can inform those preventive efforts by having a much more solid and close look at what that inflow is looking like for our community. And so looking at the average, we are having about 7 people come into our system on a monthly basis. However, we know that housing is not matching up. And so we are looking into bringing much more strategically and much more consistently our partners in the preventive field. And we are also looking to develop a prevention working group in the future to be able to look at inflow at a much closer, in a much closer way. I don't know if you want to add anything, Brittany.
VNA kind of hit the nail on the head here in saying that as we're collecting data, really trying to look at prevention. How can we stop people from entering the system in the first place? And I think what is really important to recognize about Santa Fe is that we have a lot of resources. It's just about piecing it together. And so being able to see, and learn about new programs on how we can stop people from entering the system to begin with is a part of our work. And we want to inform community members and some of our stakeholders and partners on, while we're doing that, what can y'all be doing to develop the housing to identify some of those, BNA calls them pockets of opportunity, and I love that phrase in terms of being able to creatively house people while some of that policy and development is working. So being able, again, to drive data and utilize our stakeholders and be able to provide information and some guidance on what increasing housing stock can look like while we work on the back end and try to decrease inflow.
Perfecto. No tengo otras preguntas. Muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Haggerty, Mr. Rodriguez, and Ms. Campos for the presentation. I really appreciate it. So the city has been part of Built for Zero since 2018, correct, right? Can you cover with us what initial goals were set back then? Because that was 6 years ago, and we're talking about a 2-year aim. What was accomplished in the last 6 years? Did we have a 2-year plan in 2018? Did we meet that plan? All of that stuff. I mean, because I'm thinking back to when I came on board as a counselor in 2020, and I recall a main priority was to have functional zero for housing. I think it's functional zero, right, for veterans. And here we are 4 years later, and we haven't met that. And our target is by Veterans Day this year, which is, I'm a bit, I think that's a wrong date to have as this. I'll set that just as I find it a bit disrespectful for veterans in the instance. What happens if we don't meet it? That's a day we recognize veterans, and if we don't meet the goal by that day for them, I would like for us to establish a new date just in respect for veterans. But going back to the initial question of what has been done since 2018? I mean, I know we've been working at this. I know there's been folks even prior to you, Ms. Rodriguez, coming on board, and now I don't want to diminish everything that's been accomplished, but I also want the public to understand where we've come, to understand where we're going, so to speak.
Madam Chair, Counselor, thank you so much for that observation and that question, because I think that's a really important aspect of the work that we have accomplished in the past couple of months. Built for Zero did have a rocky start in Santa Fe, and it was, kind of hard to find that leader to really take that initiative and drive the complicated models of functional zero, the population identification, the data collection. And Roseanne is going to have a little bit more history, because I only became familiar with the project when I started working for the city, which was last year. And so being able to dive deep into this model and the work that Santa Fe was doing, wasn't doing, kind of doing, is something that we definitely have taken into consideration, especially working with our providers who feel the same way and saying, like, we've been at this since 2018. How is this going to be any different? And I think that I can, really excitedly, positively say that what's different is that we have a full team. We've got myself, a lead on system improvement, and a data manager, and we have an agency that fully supports the work that we're doing and is motivated to continue to support that. So it's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. And so looking back at the past work, I think we've learned a lot of lessons on what does community engagement look like, what do providers want and need from us, and being able to take those lessons and apply it now to make sure that the progress we are making is meaningful and sustainable. Did that answer your question?
It did, but if we can get an update on the last 6 years, I mean, I think we want to tell the good as long as we're making sure we're recognizing, the challenges as well, because we learn and grow from challenges. We learn, and we're able to pivot and set goals based off of mistakes, right? And because it was a brand new process to the city, and I will always encourage us as a city to establish priorities and goals, et cetera. And so if we can, get an update, and it doesn't need to be a formal presentation, but
Ms. Haggerty, why don't you come give, because it sounds like you have a lot to say on what the first 6 years looked like.
Well, I might have the most institutional memory. I don't have perfect information, but thank you so much for your question, Counselor. My recollection is that, well, first of all, hats off to Santa Fe for joining, which a voluntary effort to really get to an achievable but audacious end state, to really get to a solution for this issue. Much like every community we work with, it takes a leader to say, we need to do this, and then it takes time to build the team to actually come together. This is, as you've heard, all about collaboration, getting different stakeholders to feel that they can work toward a common aim, to figure out how the funding can be different, how the goals can be aligned, and so Santa Fe was well on its way when the pandemic hit, and it's just that interrupted every city's progress, I have to say, and so we've seen. Really, I would date it to maybe September of 2022 when we had a feeling that the majority of the communities that were part of this movement were really kind of getting their feet under them again. Many, as you're aware, of the folks working in health, human services, education, there was so much attrition in those fields to even build up their teams again. And so when I think the big change in Santa Fe that we were mindful of was when the New Mexico Coalition to End Homelessness really leaned in with a new leadership to this fundamental data model and to bringing the organizations back around to kind of educate them. And so I think there was, that kind of relationship building that happened before the pandemic, like many communities, a pause during the pandemic. And then what we've seen since, I would say, maybe early 2023, just the group really coming together here. I was thinking, listening to your question, that I would draw a parallel with Newark, that very similarly another, larger city, but, really strong leadership from the mayor, trying to get everyone on the same page, interruption from the pandemic. And now, they're just doing extraordinary work, in terms of the reductions they're seeing. So I would just feel very confident that you're on the right path and that this does take some time. It's all voluntary. It's not that, there's a new rule from HUD that everyone has to work in a new way. The fact that agencies have come together and really kind of regrouped after the pandemic is something I think you should take real pride in as a leader in the community.
I guess were there goals? We've got a 2-year aim strategic framework in front of us. Was there similar frameworks established in the past?
I don't think so, because the organizations hadn't come together. So we weren't, Santa Fe hadn't declared a specific population starting target, as Brittany said. You start somewhere, kind of develop the alignment and the muscle to work in this new way, and then you spread it to other populations. And so the fact that Santa Fe is focused on veterans and youth makes sense. I would assume that, as Brittany said, very quickly, some of these other subpopulations will become the focus. And I would actually, your point about, can this be done in terms of veterans by Veterans Day? One of the really hopeful things in the work nationally is Congress has provided sufficient rental vouchers called VA supportive housing vouchers that come with case management to get every single veteran who's remaining homeless in the country into housing. And the fact that it hasn't happened really is a coordination problem. How to identify these individuals, how to connect the dots with housing, how to recruit the landlords who understand how vouchers work. The VA has struggled a bit for the same reason in the last couple of years with staffing shortages, but I think the guidance came out just in June, prioritizing hiring case managers for veteran homelessness. So I think you're setting your goal here and your aim at a really important and promising time where the VA is leaning in as well.
Okay, thank you for the additional context. I appreciate that. question I initially had was around who developed the two-year goal, but it's looked like the stakeholders. Is there a reason why policymakers weren't involved in that process? Just because I completely agree with the current population pools you're looking at, but I'm also thinking of some of the potential missed opportunities in regards to the disability community, the members facing mental health issues. I mean, just driving to this meeting, I saw an obvious person having a mental health crisis walking down Ceres Road. And those are the issues that residents see on a daily basis here in the city. And we as policymakers get asked, what are you doing to help these individuals? And I would like for us to say, we are doing X, Y, and Z. And so I guess my question is there a reason why the policymakers weren't involved in this kind of stakeholder process, whether it's establishing system level aims and priorities or championing improvement and changes? Because I think at least from my perspective, I can't speak for my colleagues, I don't want to speak on their behalf, but many stakeholders in the community provide us with recommendations, input, feedback, et cetera, and we can help be that liaison to provide that information to y'all, and not to say it has to be scripture, so to speak, because it's coming from a policymaker, but I want to make sure I'm sharing that information as much as possible. So that was a question I had. Is there a reason why policymakers weren't on the first two kind of lists, but on the part of monitoring progress and problem solve and clear the path? I think we could definitely help in all four of those categories.
Thank you for that question, and I completely agree. And I will note that city staff was involved in every single one of those meetings. And when we're talking about policymakers, right, we are looking towards our city councilors to be able to support us in that. But we had affordable housing in those meetings. We had youth and family services. I can't believe I forgot that in those meetings, in addition to county staff. So those are kind of the key players in the S3 housing initiative. And then being able to pull in other city, county staff who do have some type of influence or knowledge of this type of work to be able to help us guide those recommendations. So there was heavily active involvement from city staff, but you're correct in identifying that we were missing city councilors and direct policymakers in those conversations. And we would love to have you moving forward in all of those conversations, not just in clearing the path, but also helping us set standards and expectations, goals and aims.
Thank you. And I just want to, at least from my perspective, say, hey, I'm willing to help. I forgot to ask this question because it was a previous slide. We were talking about the 2-year aims. When were these aims established?
So they were initially established on August 10th of 2023 in our first community meeting. And then a leadership group went to Washington, D.C. with these aims that our community had set to dive in a little bit deeper with peer communities in a, they call it a learning session, but it's a really fun kind of 2-day conference where we're able to really kind of come out of our natural environment and focus on those aims. And then we brought that back, again, the same aims that our community set in November for a community meeting where we all touched base, made sure everything still looked accurate, doable, and that's how we set those and how we're moving forward right now.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now to get a little into the data, I think it was 385 on your presentation folks exited. Does that mean 385 folks were housed? But can you help clarify what that means when they exit?
So 856 people were served, so they were enrolled. in a program funded by our COC in Santa Fe. And then 385 were discharged. So that means there could be a variety of reasons why they were exited. It could have been that maybe they had to be sent to the hospital and then they had to be exited from the program if they were there for more than 90 days. And so really, when they are exited from a program, it means that an agency is unable to get in contact with them. Maybe they know that they were, that they moved to another state. This could also mean, in some cases, that the client is deceased or has gone to prison as well. And so it could be really a variety of reasons why clients are exited from programs. And so this is why it is such a data quality issue that we are really trying to clean up in our community, is to be able to very pointedly say where our clients are going and what that timeline looks like, so that we are able to not only track their trajectory actively in homelessness, but we can also track their patterns if they do have a history of recidivism or yeah, if they maybe have just a pattern of coming in and out of contact with agencies. So yeah, did that answer your question?
Did, so is it possible that somebody could be exited, re-entered, exited, re-entered, exited? So that 385 could be, that's a data point, right? But it could be a data point for 158 individuals, right? Is that, am I understanding from your explanation that, because it's you're saying they left the program, right? This person A left the program. Are we counting them just once as they left the program? Or what if that person re-entered the program and then they had to leave again for
Yes.
so?
And so are you asking if this would be accounting for 385 times that someone is exited, or if it would
No,
be
is that I guess
uniquely?
the question is that 385 individuals, or is it 385 times an individual has left?
Yes, so it is individuals, based off of the way that the HUD APR report
Gotcha.
extracts the data. It does and should extract each entry and exit as a unique client that is exited. However, there could be, although the margin of error is pretty short, pretty small, it could still mean that perhaps two agencies entered just slightly different information, or it could be a data quality issue where just two different entries, two different profiles were entered for one person. However, the likelihood of that actually happening is very minuscule, just because each agency does have the protocol to look up each client before they make a whole other profile for them. And so regardless of agency, each client will be assigned a personal ID number that will be the same across the board. So whatever agency they use, they will continue to have that same personal ID in HMIS.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Sometimes, especially when sometimes data can be collected twice, and it definitely has been taken into consideration here. So thank you for clarifying that. The scorecard, I look at it from the perspective of, because we've been in this for 6 years, we kind of have the cheat sheet, right? We know what the scorecard is. We set up our systems to ensure that we get 29 out of 29. And I guess the question around, it was domestic violence, which I definitely understand the confidentiality needs around that. So twofold question. Is this a problem in other cities, municipalities, counties, other Built for Zero entities? And if it is, why is Built for Zero requiring that we kind of have that system? Because, you know, I definitely have, you know, as somebody who has personal experience with somebody who's dealt with domestic violence, they are going to be some of the most closed up people and don't want to share any data. And it's completely understandable. They're scared for their life. And so just to kind of circle back to the question, is this a problem? Is every other municipality 28 out of 29? Or is Built for Zero recognize that, hey, maybe there are systems that can be in place to respect the individual's protection?
Thank you for the very good question, Counselor. Actually, it was because domestic violence agencies working with us said, like, we need to find a way for our clients not to be overlooked and to be accounted for in getting into the stream of housing assistance. So it was really, you know, domestic violence agencies wanting to make sure that they were not overlooked, that accounts for their being part of the scorecard. And as Vianney mentioned, the challenge in every community is like how to thread that needle that you spoke to, protecting the individual data, but having at least the identified numbers so that those agencies working with clients in such sensitive situations know where people stand in the housing system and aren't overlooked, but that the system itself isn't kidding itself, that there's a whole group of very vulnerable people that still need housing. So it's that's why the scorecard field is like, do you have a way of capturing it? Not like, do you have everybody's personal information, but do you have a way of accounting for these individuals and families?
Gotcha. Thank you for clarifying. So I guess that gets back to the original thought I had of, we have the roadmap in front of us in regards to what Built for Zero is looking for. So can we set up a system to get these last three ticked off? That way we have 29 of the 29?
100% yes.
Okay.
And I'm a very competitive person and so very motivated to get us our 29 out of 29. And we mentioned it before, the community really helped us take off all of those other boxes. And right now those three fall on us. And so we're really trying to figure out how within our own systems, are we really going to solidly answer yes on those challenges?
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. I appreciate that. There's been a lot of conversation around, data collection and identifying the number of the unhoused in our community and how it fluctuates from winter months to summer months. What are the reasons, justifications for that? But I guess my question to you is, what do you say to the folks that will look at that number of roughly 500 unhoused, that data point, and to the individual that says that's much higher? There's a much higher number out there than 500. That's and I've got to agree with folks, because we're not going to be perfect. We're not going to touch every unhoused person in our community. We're not going to be able to collect data on every person. So I guess, what do you have to say to, or what is your response in regards to somebody that says, hey, the number's probably double that?
That is a great question, and we'll practice right now. I think our response is that we are confident in the numbers that we are collecting now, and acknowledging that, yes, our numbers have increased over the years. We are seeing more of it. It is impacting our community in different and new ways. However, with this new type of data collection and community sharing, we are accurately able to identify and say, yeah, we have about 450 to 500 people experiencing homelessness in our community, and then being able to say that's a doable number to problem solve. There are communities facing, such higher levels of homelessness in systems more broken than ours, and that challenge is just, kind of beyond comprehension. But right now, we, Santa Fe, are in a moment where we have a manageable amount of individuals. We might not have all the housing that we need, but we can certainly work on that front end to make sure that we are accurately identifying and being able to count. I don't really love, saying that we're, counting individuals experiencing homelessness, but truthfully, that's what we are. And we are taking a human-centered design in that. So they're not just a number, they're a person. But we've reached this confident, accurate number, and it is not as daunting as it may seem, because I completely understand that it seems daunting.
Right. Okay. Well, and I think it's not a perfect science, as I mentioned. There's not going to be a tool we're going to be able to count everybody, but I appreciate the context. I forgot to ask this question about youth. I years ago used to work in the youth development field, and we would consider youth anybody from 0 to 24. So I didn't know what spectrum you were using to identify as youth, right? Because sometimes that cutoff is 18. Sometimes it's 21. So I don't know for this particular study what you're classifying as youth.
It encapsulates from 18 to 24. Although for some particular programs, it can be from 18 and then the cutoff is 22. And so sometimes youth can be caught in this really odd limbo of, being cut off, for example, from youth shelters and family services outreach program, being cut off at 22, and so not having access to the services that they did before, but then still not feeling like the services for adults are adequate for them. So they're considered elder youth, 22 to 24. And so if they're not really considered youth by certain programs, that's an issue also for a lot of youth in our community.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. And that's more so for help for public education, just because what do you mean by, sometimes somebody might think youth is 16 years old. I mean, everybody's going to have a different idea.
And just for clarification, so even though the cutoff is 24, it technically could mean that they could be 24 and 364 days old before they're cut off. So it is technically 25, but it is 24, including the year that they are 24. If that makes sense.
It does. It definitely does. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I appreciate the presentation. I truly do. Especially, some of the focus that's really been taken on veterans and youth in our community. I think those are, veterans, a population that they gave to our country. And I think, it's our responsibility to ensure that we give back to them. And then for youth, we have the opportunity to help folks break cycles early on in their life. So I think, if there is a way, I know on your list you have a veteran-specific safe outdoor space, which I'm 100% supportive of. I wish we had that priority with the first safe outdoor space. I believe we have one veteran there, but anytime we can provide housing to veterans, I will fully stand behind it. And if we can maybe look at something for our youth, because young folks would like to congregate. I'm an old fogey now, but I remember when I was young, I used to like to hang out with my peers, and because we would share lived experiences, right? And different lifestyles, right? I've got a daughter who will stay up till midnight because that's who she is. I'm asleep early because then I'm an old fogey, but thank you again. I really appreciate it, Ms. Haggerty. Thank you for everything you're doing. Ms. Rodriguez, good to see you. And Ms. Sylvan, very nice to meet you. No other questions, Madam Chair.
Counselor Chavez.
Thank you so much, Chair. And can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. All right, awesome. Thank you. I want to thank you for the presentation. I have, I think, mostly comments. I do just want to comment kind of off of what Councilor Garcia said. I think we really need to be cautious in involving city officials in these conversations and building initiatives and collecting data and working with these individuals, because we're not on the ground. I like the fact that we have our community partners, organizations that are there beside these individuals, getting to know them, involved in these important conversations. As city officials, what we need is the information from people with expertise so that we can make moves at a government level to help with the change. I think when we help vulnerable populations, bringing politics in it can often take away from the purpose. So I just wanted to add, yes, we need to be involved, in creating policy to contribute to your work, but I would be cautious in involving us in any other way. Because like I said, we're not on the ground doing that important work, and we all have our ideas on how it could be better, but truly the people that are working with our homeless population are the ones that knows what's best. And so I just wanted to make that comment. I wanted a little bit more information. So, I have brought community partners together on a very small scale as the school leader. And when there's alignment, beautiful things happen. Like, it's amazing what can be accomplished when everyone's aligned. And so you talked about having like a North Star. So everyone's kind of moving in the right direction. We're not duplicating services. We're not duplicating data. But can you talk to me more about how that North Star is being established and identified and communicated with community partners?
Yes, and thank you for that question and really bringing that back around to this conversation. And the way we're facilitating that is through our community meetings and our one-on-one time with agencies to understand a little bit more about what they define as success and what they want to see in the future. And we do receive a lot of assistance from Community Solutions, and we are in this working group having just that conversation. How do we find the North Star? And we're realizing it's going to take time. There's a lot of ideas out there. There's a lot of players, and really striving for consent rather than consensus on what a North Star might look like. So, understanding that not everybody, we're not going to have, 100% agreement on what a North Star might be. But if we can all have a small say in what that North Star is, being able to build that capacity and that vision is what we started working on starting in August, going to DC, going.
Counselor Chavez, can you mute yourself? I think we're getting some feedback when, and then you can unmute when you have another question. Go ahead.
Love hearing my own voice. No, it's fine. And continuing to have those larger community convenings, and asking some of those questions, what are 3 things? What do you define as success? What's going to make you feel confident and meaningful in your roles, and being able to take those little pieces of feedback and piece it together into a North Star message. But again, that's going to take us a little bit of time, and we really want to make sure that we're trying to engage, every person, every entity, every agency that is driving this work forward, so that they're included and that their vision is heard and recognized as well. It's kind of a roundabout answer, but I hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
Counselor.
And I think, in regards to North Star, it doesn't have to be like so clearly defined, because I don't think it can be with work like this, but it has to be like, how are we all moving in the right direction, like contributing in our own way and moving in the right direction. And when I was working with multiple partners and organization, like that is what became helpful, is just how can you contribute, and that everyone that was involved knew how that organization could contribute. So they knew how to do the warm handoffs to the right agencies that could offer the right help and support. I always say Santa Fe is super rich in resources, but we just haven't aligned in an efficient way to maximize on the amount of resources we actually have. And so when I hear you talking about alignment, and I hear you talking about how we are encouraging our partners to talk to each other to make sure that we're not duplicating services, but it's also to really take advantage of the, richness of the services we actually have. And unfortunately, for being so rich in these resources in Santa Fe, I don't think we've really seen that full potential because of lack of alignment and kind of lack of same direction and proficiency in what each of these organizations have to offer, and what, rather than, because it is a very competitive field, you know, they're applying for funding, the way they're funded is competitive. So it's just a very competitive field. But when we're able to identify how they are adding to the solution and how they're playing an important role to that solution, and everyone is aware of that, you know, we start seeing how many resources we actually have. And we are super rich in that. We just have to become more organized and more aligned. And are you seeing like an increase in resources with those conversations occurring as you've been doing this work?
Yes, we have, and we've identified some new resources, you know, on the state level, and being able to bring those key partners into really grassroots conversations. And the two off the top of my head, and one that I only know the name of, is the New Mexico Eviction Prevention. You know, when they joined the Connect Network, that was something that, you know, in a community meeting, a lot of providers were able to make those connections and network and understand a little bit more. And the other one is the landlord incentive program that is being worked across the state, and including those individuals, case managers, gosh, I don't know what navigators they might call themselves, in conversations around the work and planning being done, and bringing those resources into our community, especially looking at some of the legislation that's on the table, to be able to support not only clients, but landlords and individuals who might be offering that service to also have access to different types of resources. And so, like I said, those are just the two off the top of my head, but by coming together in these community settings and networking and meeting new individuals and learning about new programs, we've had, you know, a lot of aha moments and open eyes and kind of some sighs of relief and being like, okay, there might actually be a solution to the problem I'm facing right now.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. The last thing I have, and so just to emphasize, like, continue the work with alignment, with that North Star, making sure that we are able to really see, you know, like I say, the value and the richness of the resources we have present here in Santa Fe, because it's there. I've seen it firsthand, just like how much can be done when everyone kind of comes together and goes in the same direction. This is a much larger scale, but like I saw how, you know, disorganization made it feel like we couldn't accomplish anything. And then once it was organized and aligned, it was like, whoa, like we have this the whole time. So, you know, thank you for identifying that, you know, that work is being done and going to continue to be done, because I think that's when we'll accomplish the most. The last thing I have is just around youth. So, you know, unfortunately, I see youth homelessness directly. And in regards to data, yes, there are students, or sorry, I say students, there are kids in like CYFD custody, but are kind of off the grid, couch surfing, you know. The process with youth homelessness is really difficult. You know, I've had many kiddos that I've worked with who don't have a place to go. They're staying at a friend's house. And then when the time comes that there's a bed open in the shelter, they can deny it. Like they can deny being housed. And then we kind of lose track of where they're staying and who we're staying with. I feel like the accuracy of that data can be very difficult because there's no like true guardianship for a lot of these students. There's not one single individual tracking them, you know, making sure that they're sheltered. Like it is very disorganized, and a lot of that comes because, you know, CYFD is involved, and their high turnover rate makes it even more impossible. So I just wonder if conversations have been had about that, because just that, like for me to track, and I'm on the ground with these kids, for me to track where they're at and who's responsible for them and what's going on is difficult. And I'm like having these direct conversations with these kids. So I could just imagine, when we're looking at that population as a whole, how difficult it could actually be how difficult it could be to track that data.
I'm going to answer, and then I'll let VNA step in. And you're correct in saying that the parameters surrounding youth homelessness look much different than adult homelessness. And with some of the HUD guidelines, we are able to encapsulate kiddos who are couch surfing, who are doubled up with other families, who are staying in shelter. One of the relationships that we're wanting to build in the future is with CYFD. However, that's not a Built for Zero conversation. That is a coalition conversation. And one of our community partners that we lean heavily into for this data is Communities and Schools in the Adelante program. And they have just a significant pool of data that they work with. And I'm going to let VNA just briefly kind of touch on what those populations look like when they're collecting data on homeless youth.
So I want to just briefly state that how we have a focus for Built for Zero on certain populations, so youth and veterans. I think it is also a very important point for us to reiterate that our main focus at the moment is literal homelessness. And that means people who are actively in the streets and using shelters, just because we can only tackle one part of the problem at a time. However, this is an aspect that I have taken personal curiosity in and have been wanting to gather information and data on. And so, like Brittany said, we have had conversations with Adelante, which notoriously is in schools, and they are working with their own data collection that goes outside of what HUD considers to be actively homeless. And so what you're describing is hidden homelessness. So people who are couch surfing, maybe they are doubled up, maybe they are temporarily housed by a family member, but then in a week, they're going to be back at trying to find somewhere to be. And so Adelante, on a quarterly basis, they share their data with me. And so just in a couple months that I took a look at their data, I think it was just 2 months of difference. There were a total of 951 youth who are homeless. This just doesn't fall under HUD's definition of homelessness. And then 2 months after, this number came out to 1,075. And so you can see that this is very rapidly increasing. It is just a population, like you said. It is very difficult for us to have any type of real solid understanding at the moment of what this looks like. And so we are trying to, sort of tackle our focuses like in a very present fashion, but we are wanting to, as we are naturally going to move our focuses onto other populations, I think this will also naturally expand in the way that we define homelessness and also address homelessness within the program.
Yeah, and I think when we talk, thank you so much. I think when we talk about prevention, that is probably the population that we would want to focus on the most, because this is the population, those youth members that have a home instability are going to, we know, are the population that are experiencing exposure to all of the ACE indicators that would raise their risk for homelessness or home instability because of just trauma factors, right? So it's like that generational trauma that we see. They're going to repeat the steps of why they're in the situation they're in. Not every single one of them, but it is a vulnerable population that, if is focused on, could be a huge preventative measure that a community takes in order to reduce their future population of homelessness. That's just a comment in what I think would make sense. But I appreciate the information. I appreciate all the work that you all are doing and the information that you brought forward. And thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you so much, Counselor Chavez. And I just have a few comments and questions. So I do want to second what Counselor Chavez said about being careful around the role of policymakers in making the very specific action steps. As somebody who's worked in this field and have experienced times when individuals who hold the money or the political power, but not necessarily are on the ground, come in to make some changes, it can sometimes throw the work off a bit. So again, I really do want to give deference to those of you who are on the ground. I have really seen the complexity and understand, that challenge. But that is also why I wanted to bring you all here, because I do think it is important that that we're able to provide some information from you that we're hearing from our constituents. From all of our conversations, none of it's been new that I've been able to give you, but you never know when something's going to hit that would be of interest. But that being said, I think that it is important that we actually look at what the relationship of the city is to Built for Zero, because we do not dictate your actions. This is being headed up by New Mexico Coalition to End Homelessness as the lead, and the broader S3 coalition is in, that is how the decisions are made around goals, strategies. We are a partner. We are absolutely a partner. We are at the table. We do provide funding, and also again, how some of these other pieces come together with some of the broader policies that we need to see citywide. So can you actually talk a little bit about that structure? Because I think that is important, that while the city has been a key partner in establishing the program, bringing this information here, but at this point, we do not run this the way we run, say, economic development or land use.
Yes, thank you for giving us the opportunity to kind of delineate where people fall into the picture. And I want to backtrack to S3 because I want to acknowledge that they are not the ones setting the goals. Our community is. They are the ones supporting it. And they are champions in Built for Zero work and do want to be involved in decision making, but also guided by what we're seeing on the ground in the same way that you all are asking for participation. So you're correct. The city does not dictate. They are equal partners in the S3 initiative, and everybody's voices are heard there. And what that group of individuals really focus on is funding. They're all funders, right? We've got private, we've got county, city, and nonprofit funders all sitting in one group, talking about the work that we're seeing and hearing about on the ground. And so we're able to be those experts in the room. I do participate in those meetings every Monday to guide those conversations and to, really be leaned on to put out, solutions and what we think will work best or what we're seeing. And so being equal partners from the S3 perspective is one of the reasons we've been able to make so much success and have a neutral playing ground for Built for Zero. And then being able to, again, really lean into our community, our providers, our community members, to also help us inform and guide the work, and feel empowered to do the work as well. I don't know if that answered your question, but everybody has a lane, and I think when we're talking about system alignment, it is how do we drive together, and so being able to clearly identify those roles is very important.
Thank you so much. I think that is some really important clarity. And then you also bring up, another piece that as we talk about, what has been done in laying the groundwork, and so much of this, as we have discussed, is this alignment piece. A lot of times in the nonprofit field, organizations are kind of driven by where they can get their money. And that can be really, really challenging to be able to change focus, change processes, change goals, because sometimes their key funding sources are not necessarily going to be on board with that specific process. They may be going for the same goal, but it is really interesting. You know, I think we discussed this a lot with our affordable housing. We have a different utilization or, a definition of affordable housing than HUD does, but we still have to abide by HUD's rules when we are using HUD's funding. So I can appreciate the challenge it takes to really get that alignment with all of these different groups that have a role to play, while also ensuring their financial stability, which means they may be having to work in a way that is not necessarily as congruent. And I imagine that can be, or that has been a really large challenge for Built for Zero to start everybody kind of driving in the same direction, especially given how resource rich we are, which is wonderful, but also does mean that we do have a lot more organizations that we are trying to work with their specific needs and specific processes while also kind of bringing them together. I don't know if you have any more to say about that. If you do, please go ahead. But I know I just waxed poetic for a while on that one based on my own experience.
I'll just add one small comment in talking about alignment, right? We're also talking about aligning funding. And I think that's another culture shift that every organization is really going to have to think about. And when we're aligning and driving towards the North Star, really being realistic in what funding, who should be going for what funding and for what reason, and how is that going to contribute to the system as a whole.
Yeah, thank you for that. I can imagine that is that's probably a lot of work and a lot of conversation, because of course each organization is very invested in protecting their own financial stability so that they can protect their staff. It is by no means a simple like, all right, we're doing this. I need you everybody on this system right now, and we're going to be doing this process. That becomes a lot more challenging and definitely takes time and buy-in. And quite frankly, I can see how organizations would be potentially hesitant to sign on board if it means threatening their own funding sources. So I do not envy you all in that work, but I'm very grateful that you're doing it. The Built for Zero dashboard, is that available to the public?
It is not available to the public in a way that you can log into our dashboard. What we are working on doing on website, the coalition website, is having access to that dashboard in not necessarily real time, but it be updated monthly, and try to figure out kind of I'm not a tech person, like where's Ben? How you can, interact with that system to look at the different populations without having to log into the actual community dashboard where people could potentially meddle with our data.
Yep.
So, but we are actively working on how to make that accessible to everybody.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And I think I had mentioned to you, what is it, Santa Fe data platform that I need to connect you. And I will do that because I think that they could actually be really helpful in some of these pieces, as well as may have some data that could be beneficial for you all. We talked a little bit about the challenges with anonymity and the by name list. And I think that is another really important, and as I said before, you have these ideas that you put on paper, and then when you start working with people, things get messy, hard and different, and you have to come up with some solutions. So, and also dealing with HIPAA. So I don't know if there was anything further. I know we discussed it a little bit in specifics to domestic violence, but how are we, or you guys, really working with the population as a whole around this piece, if there's anything different than what was already discussed before in specifics to domestic violence victims?
I think we touched on it a little bit, and we really do want to be person-centered, and we want to avoid just counting individuals, and we do want to know them by name, but absolutely respect, everybody's right to privacy. which is why we've come up with several modes to be able to collect that information and really, lean into our providers and empower and encourage them to continue to build the relationships that they're building. So if that person is not comfortable providing their information, at least the person working with them has that historical knowledge logged away in their brain. We ask people, you don't have to write it down for us, but perhaps you could be keeping a side list, of these conversations and people you're interacting with so that they can at least anonymously be accounted for in our by name list. And so looking at domestic violence in our priority list, those individuals pop up with weird codes and nobody really knows, who that is except the case manager that's working with them. And so we're actually also able to have conversations around those individuals and really setting, privacy standards. We're not going to be talking about, identifying factors. We're here to talk about housing in case conferencing and how are we going to drive housing forward while you, case manager, the expert in your client, works on some of those other things that are going to maintain stability for that individual. And so we absolutely want to work with the utmost respect with people's privacy, but also want to figure out, those ways to make sure that we are accurately collecting data and taking into account every person in our community.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I would imagine for continuity, obviously there's a case manager. We see a lot of turnover in this field, unfortunately. And so I'm guessing that you would rely on the organizations for how they continue with their continuity and having discussions around making sure that those codes don't necessarily shift, even if their case manager does, because you mentioned a lot of things in their brains. But would I understand that would be really the responsibility of those agencies?
That's a great understanding. It would be the responsibility of those agencies. And we just really want everybody to stay put right now so that, figure out that system and work with agencies to help them come up with ways to track that historical tribal knowledge of the individuals that they're working with.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. I do want to talk a little bit about where we've come from. So we mentioned right now the Santa Fe scorecard, we're 26 out of 29. Where did we start with? Do you have, I know you did not come here at the beginning, but do you happen to know, or Ms. Haggerty, do you happen to know where we started with the scorecard at the beginning?
That the city didn't have the data support from the coalition, which is where this HMIS system is stored, to be able even to get the starting data. That was one of the challenges. And so more is the credit to the city to, sticking with this and working with the leadership at the coalition to even get them on board and get the data capacity in place to have a starting dashboard. So that's one of the things that is so impressive, I think, about where the city's effort is, to give you some perspective and context. So much of this work has happened since the beginning of 2023. The alignment was taking shape between 2018 and the end of the pandemic. But once the data capability came into play, and I think the last groups were rallied, this has been moving really quickly, which is why when, across our 143 communities, I'm asked, which communities to watch, I say Santa Fe and Newark. Just how quickly they've pulled everybody together once they had the right infrastructure in place.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that perspective. That's good to hear. And again, credit to where credit is due of really the members of the coalition that have done such incredible work. Let's see, we've covered a lot of this ground. I think all of the questions that I have been answered over the course of the discussion. The other thing I will just say, I'm sure I've said this before because it stuck with me so much. One of my professors, when I was getting my master's in public health, always said that public health is invisible when it's working. And so one thing that I want to make sure that we are, again, giving you all credit for is the prevention. What has been prevented that we're not seeing? We know this is a very visible problem in our community. And it is a issue that, an issue that is very, felt by all of our residents in a variety of ways. And the urgency to continue to move forward as quickly and efficiently as possible is important. You know, again, public health, we're really good at being incrementalists because we have to be. I remember the time that we discovered that preschool obesity levels leveled off, and we were very excited that, you know, this was progress, that suddenly we weren't just going up anymore. But that does really speak to the fact that I just want us to remember, and for the community to remember, that there is a lot that has been prevented that we are not going to see. And it is very hard to compare where we are to where we would have been had we not done any of this work, especially given the pandemic that really, you know, changed the entire system for us. So I know that you guys do not get enough credit for that, because again, it's invisible when it's working. And so I want to make sure that you and all of the partners that have been involved in Built for Zero, and our city staff that has done such incredible work, that you are recognized for the fact that things are not worse because of your work. And yes, there's still so much work to do, and you're on it, you're competitive, I love it. But things would be much, much worse without the work that you and our partners and our service providers are doing every single day. And that's hard to see. So just wanted to make sure that that was recognized.
You.
You're very welcome. And thank you all again so much for being here. Really do appreciate it. I am sure that we will want another update, and, you know, Brittany, you and I will stay in touch of when you think it'll be, you know, appropriate to come forward again, that there's enough that has changed. And so I look forward to continue to work with you. And as always, please reach out to us whenever you need anything.
Y punto de información rapidín. Si podrían, por favor, para la presentación que nos van a dar, incluir también tránsito. Y tenemos una nueva resolución acerca del bullying para crear espacios seguros en lugares de la ciudad. Sugiero que si pueden incluirlo en la presentación, como tal vez otras maneras que estamos trabajando con la ciudad.
Okay, moving on. So we do not have anything pulled off consent. Moving on to matters from staff. Any matters from staff today?
Evening. Just wanted to let everyone know that the Bicentennial Pool will open on July 6th as planned, and we're excited to welcome everybody into the pool. So have a safe and happy 4th of July. Thank you.
And I'll just take a moment that we have Randy Randall, who is helping and stepping in when the absence of Rich. So welcome, representing community development, and we look forward to having you at our meeting. So if you have any matters, now would be the time.
No matters yet. Thank you.
All
And
right.
thank you for the welcome.
Of course, of course. Any matters for members of the committee at this time? Counselor Chavez, I cannot see you, so if you have any, just shout it out.
No, I'm good. Thank you. Hope everyone has a good evening.
Counselor
Um,
Castro?
Yeah, I'll just very quickly give my condolences to the family of Leonard Peltier, who was up for the 4th time denied parole since 1977, and we'll hope again for 2026 to see what happens.
Thank you. Any other matters? Counselor Garcia?
Yeah, Madam Chair, just wondering if I can request for a presentation to be given to the committee on the Midtown concept map. Director Iverson provided me a copy of at least the map, and I had asked for her to share it to the rest of the committee, but I think it's a good opportunity for us to dive into what the concept is, what properties have been RFP'd, et cetera, because definitely have a lot of questions after reviewing that map, and spoken with some community members who have similar questions, and I think it's a good opportunity for us just to have a presentation and conversation on the topic.
Yes, absolutely. We have regular Midtown updates that are being scheduled out, so I will be sure to ask Director Iverson to include that when she comes in for the next one. And with that, I have no matters this evening. A happy 4th of July, everybody. Please be safe, and make sure that you are taking all precautions needed against personal safety as well as safety of our community. And with that, our next meeting is Wednesday, July 24th, and we are adjourned at 7:12 PM. Thank you all.